Hi, I'm John Fuller, Vice Chairman of SAEN, Stop Airport Expansion and Noise. This is the campaign group set up in Southend to campaign against expanded operations at the local airport. Today I'm talking about the Council's various claims that have been made in connection with the creation of jobs and the myths surrounding those jobs. This was originally the main justification for the whole programme of expansion at the airport. The councils believed that this would generate hundreds of jobs, although there are an awful lot of councillors who spoke solely about the extra convenience of having an airport fairly close, but not too close to their homes, without the slightest consideration at all for those who actually live directly under the flight path. But the official position of the councils was the reason why expansion of the airport was so important was because of the number of jobs that would be created. So the airport would claim that, and does claim that, over 500 jobs have been created as a result of expanded operations at the local airport. However, it is important to remember that a lot of jobs came from Stansted when EasyJet moved from Stansted and transferred a lot of staff across here. The precise numbers, a lot of people debate backwards and forwards, but we are talking over 200 jobs transferred to Southend. So probably around about net 300 jobs genuinely created as a result of expanded operations there. But it's incredibly important to actually analyse the details around these jobs and the impact that expanded operations at Southend are actually having upon employment across the whole area. And that's really what I want to focus upon now. One of the crucial points to remember is that here in the UK, for many, many years now, we have recognised, national government and local councils ought to recognise, that the country suffers a huge aviation tourism deficit. Around about 5 years ago, just about the point of the financial collapse, we suffered an aviation tourism deficit of around about 17 to 18 billion pounds a year. That's far more people travelling abroad to spend their money than travelling here, foreign tourists travelling to the UK. And that loss is equivalent to broadly around about 500,000 jobs. So it really is a huge amount of money that's involved here and a huge number of jobs involved. Now, when the councils originally were considering the prospect of expanding operations at the local airport, one of the crucial jobs they were asked to do was to consider what the impact would have upon local employment or upon the wider area of encouraging more people, if you like, to actually travel abroad. And there's no evidence at all that the councils actually undertook any kind of detailed analysis on that at all. So we are now 18 months into expanded operations at the airport, and we now get to see a clearer idea of just what the impacts are of expanded operations there. Despite the Olympics of 2012, hardly any foreign tourists are coming into the UK from Germany, from Netherlands, from Spain, from Italy to spend their money here. The vast majority of the traffic is actually one way. Broadly speaking, in the first year of operations, there were around 180,000 internal passengers. That would be passengers travelling from Southend Airport to places like Edinburgh or Exeter or Newquay, but destinations within the UK. So they are not impacted at all in the question of the aviation tourism deficit. However, when we look at the tourism deficit, that is the number of people who are travelling abroad compared with the number of people who actually travel into the UK, we find that there's a net tourism deficit in the region of 650,000 passengers in the first year of operations. So it's a huge number of Brits who are travelling abroad and having the holidays abroad compared with those actually travelling here to the UK from Italy or Spain or wherever it may be. Far more people from the UK want to travel to Alicante or Amsterdam than those people who live in those two fabulous cities want to travel to Southend-on-Sea, or even for that matter to London. So it ought really not to come as any surprise to people in government that far more people in Britain, cold and wet and chilly sometimes Britain, want to travel abroad. And by merely offering a completely new service or series of services or destinations to populate the population in South Essex, what has actually happened is that huge numbers of people are now travelling abroad, far more than if the airport had actually not expanded its operations. People are actually being tempted to go to places that they otherwise would not have considered travelling to Stansted or Gatwick to travel to. Now, the councillors made an awful lot of play when they originally decided to expand operations at the airport. There would be an awful lot of tourists coming here and spending their money in the UK, in our bars and clubs and restaurants and shopping outlets and tourist destinations like Southend Pier. But in fact, that is not what's happened. Anybody who lives in the town or near the town knows full well that that is not what happens. Anybody who gets on a plane from Southend Airport and travels to Alicante or Amsterdam knows that those planes are by and large absolutely full of Brits. So the position is completely different to the way that councillors portrayed the issue when they originally considered expanding operations at the airport. That amount of money that is associated with 650,000 passengers, let's just quickly look at that and analyse that data. 650,000 passengers travelling abroad, that is actually the numbers of the passengers are counted twice. They're counted on their way out and they're counted on the way back. So in fact we're thinking in terms of 325,000 people who have travelled out from the UK and back. That's the net number, that's the net loss as a result of the tourism deficit at Southend Airport. And that equates to a loss of £181 million to the local Essex economy. Southend Borough Council use a calculation on the basis of a certain amount of money each passenger spends when they travel abroad. And on average across the UK, that is £557 when travelling abroad. So you multiply your £557 by your 325,000 passengers, and that gives you just over £181 million. Now, when you think in terms of the cost of employing somebody in the UK, that £181 million equates to a loss to the UK economy of around about 7,870 jobs. So nearly 8,000 jobs lost in the first year of operations, compared with probably a net gain directly at the airport of 300. This is an absolutely catastrophic policy failure. It's very difficult to think of another instance when a government or a local authority could have made a more spectacular mistake than that. 300 jobs created perhaps, compared with 7,870 lost. And they're actually planning to make things worse. Because the airport plans to expand its operations yet further and drain more money, more spending power out of the South Essex economy. At the moment, they have struggled to reach their 1 million passengers per annum target. They may perhaps hit it in their second year of operation, but we're not sure. But their long-term plan to the year 2020 is to handle up to 2 million passengers a year. But they have applied for and have got permission for a terminal that will handle 5 million passengers per annum. So their longer-term plans, if they can do it, is to expand that airport really massively. Huge amount of traffic going through that airport. And of course, if that continues to be made up of primarily Brits travelling abroad, that increases the aviation tourism deficit, the jobs lost, yet further, perhaps from around about 8,000 jobs in the first year to maybe, who knows, 40 or 50,000 jobs per annum. So councillors really ought to pay attention, but they don't want to pay attention. They're obviously too embarrassed, or I would suspect they're too embarrassed to pay attention. In July, SAEN wrote to every single councillor in Rochester Council and in Southend Council. And we put it to them what we were finding, what the figures for the first year of operation were showing. And we challenged them to come up with their own analysis. And we received a reply from both councils, no, we won't undertake our own analysis. This, you might think, underscores the fact that they're quite embarrassed. The councils would perhaps argue that it's difficult to come up with firm figures after just 1 year of operations, but you know, the position is really very clear indeed. There can't be any doubt about this. The councils hope that maybe having an airport constructed in the local area will result over a longer period of time in more businesses wanting to locate a little bit closer to the airport. But is that actually true? In fact, might the opposite actually happen? Now we all know just how noisy that airport is and just how incredibly noisy those planes are. There are an awful lot of people in business who will say, I don't really want to be too close to an airport like that. Certainly, SAEN has heard from a couple of small businessmen and a large number of residents who actually don't want to live or work close to a very noisy airport. So if you're a small businessman in business and you find that you and your staff or where you live, your life is being made a misery, then people are talking in terms of moving away from the area. And if you're a small businessman, you move away from the area and you take your staff with you, because there are some businesses which are completely transferable elsewhere. So over a longer period of time, we may see some businesses move in closer to the airport for the convenience of being close to an airport, but we will also find some businesses moving away. And there are certainly an awful lot of residents who want to move further away from the airport. Across the summer of 2013, quite a large number of people actually said it's just absolute misery. I'm going to spend more time away. Those who are retired and are able to do so spend more time out of the town, staying with friends, staying in holiday homes or wherever it may be. And as a consequence, they're not spending as much money in the town as they used to. So the longer term picture, who knows? But there can be absolutely no doubt about one core fact, and that is the aviation tourism deficit, and the fact that this new expanded airport is encouraging ever more people to travel abroad and spend their money abroad. That reduces UK employment, and it runs counter to central government policy of encouraging investment within the UK and encouraging growth of employment within the UK. One of the crucial things about our challenge to the councils to conduct their own analysis of what was going on there was that there will continue to be a series of lower level planning applications coming from the airport to the local authorities. And the fact that they have refused to undertake their own analysis, the fact that they refuse to ensure that their councillors are up to date with the reality of the employment position associated with the airport's activities, means that those councillors cannot possibly make informed decisions. That would be policy based upon the evidence. The councils are determined that the councillors must not have that degree of information. So SAEN would argue that the councils are letting down councillors. SAEN would argue that the two councils are letting down the entire population of the area, because we are shedding so many jobs, we are losing so many jobs. And we would argue that the councils are failing in their duty of care to the population. But that we'll tackle in another interview on another day. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any information at all in connection with employment at Southend Airport, we'd love to hear from you. So as always, please contact us via our website or alternatively by email at info@saen.org.uk. Thank you very much.